Well, hello there, my future gamers of 4th grade. Are you ready to begin your quest on a fraction unit? We are on lesson 23. I can add and multiply unit fractions to build fractions greater than 1 using models. Okay, my earthlings, let's begin our journey of lesson 23. Okay, circle any fractions that are equivalent to a whole number. Record the whole number below the fraction. Count by 1/4, start at 0/4, and stop at 6/4. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to count by 0/4, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 5/4, 6/4. And now when we go down here, it says count by 1/6 and start at 0/6 and stop at 14/6. So all these fractions that we're talking about, as they get higher, they're greater than 1. So let's start with 0/6, 1/6, 2/6, 3/6. All right, so then we go to 4/6, 5/6, 6/6, 7/6, 8/6, 9/6, 10/6, 11/6, 12/6, and 13/6. And lastly, we are stopping because it tells us to stop at 14/6. And as we look at that, we want to look for those wholes. We got to look for those whole numbers that are in these 6. So 0/6, well, that does equal 0. That's a whole because it's equal to 0. The next whole that we see is 6/6. That's a whole because that's equal to 1. And after 1, we're seeing 7/6 all the way to 14/6. And that's showing you that those are fractions that are greater than 1 because 6/6 is 1, and anything past that is greater than 1. Where would we see the next whole? If we kept going up, we would see 12/6. And that would be our next whole. So this one would equal, oops, excuse me, that's not correct. This one is equal to the next whole, which would be 2 wholes. And then it can continue all the way up, but it tells us to stop at 14/6. And when I look at this, you guys, I'm seeing basically a number line. So let's create a number line. When I'm counting up to 14/6, I am looking at a number line. And our number line is going to start at 0. And we're going to place those wholes. So since we're talking about sixths, we're going to cut this number line into 6. So here we go. Let's cut it up into 6. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And this is going to represent that one whole. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is going to represent our second whole. And then we can continue on. And that would bring us to the next whole. All right, so where can we place these fractions onto this number line? Well, we see that one whole here, this would represent 6, 6, right? Because a whole in there is 6, 6. And then we count up 1, 6, 2, 6, 3, 6, 4, 6, 5, 6, 6, 6 would bring us to another whole. But this would be 7, 6, 8, 6, 9, 6, 10, 6, 11, 6. 12 sixes would bring us to a whole because that would be 2. So we would put in 12, 6. This would be 13 sixths, and then we're going to stop at 14 sixths. So let's look at that. I see 2 wholes, 1 6, 2 6. So this 14 sixths would be equal to 2 and 2 6. And if we reduce that, it would be 2 and 1/3. All right, the next one is saying use parentheses to show how to make ones in the following number sentence. Well, that's a lot of 1/3, isn't it? We have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 thirds. All right, so that's basically saying 12 times 1/3. That's basically saying that. But remember when we talk about wholes and fractions, 3/3 would be an example of a whole, 4/4. The numerator and the denominator both have to have the same number in it to equal a whole. Well, what can we do with these 1/3 to represent a whole and then show 4 wholes? Well, we're going to use parentheses to break this up. And we want to see 3/3 because that would bring a whole. So right here, that's a whole because 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 equals 3/3. And we know that 3/3 is a whole. Here's another one. 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 is 3/3, which represents another whole. Then we have another one. 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 is 3/3. That represents another whole. And then our last group is equal to 3/3, which is another whole. So if you see this, we have one whole plus another whole, and our last whole all equals to 4. So we use parentheses to show how to make ones in this following number sentence. And basically we had 12 of this thirds, which all equal to 4. Okay, first we're going to multiply, and then we're going to draw a number line to support your answer. So 6 times 1/3 is equal to 6/3. So I'm going to create a number line, and this number line we're going to start at 0, and we're going to put in a whole, and we're going to start with another 2, and then let's just end with another whole. So we have each holes there. We have 1 whole, 2 whole, and 3 holes. Now if you see over here, this is thirds. So I want to break this number line up into thirds. So we've got 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And I want to show how we're moving up on this number line. Okay, so let's go. Let's start. I'm going to start at let's start at 0, and let's move it up. We've got 1/3, 2/3, 3/3, 4/3, 5/3, 6/3. Stop. Ding, 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 ding. So over here in this section, right here, we basically showed 3 times 1/3. Didn't we move up 3 times? And each one time that we moved up, we went up a third. Okay? So over here, we went up 1/3, then another third, and then our last third. So we showed 3 times that we moved up a third, which would make sense because 3/3 is equal to 1, and that's where we ended up. But then we needed to continue because we had 3 more left. So we went on 1/3, 2/3, 3/3, and we ended up here. So here we showed another 3 times 1/3. And we're left off with 2 wholes. So 6 times 1/3 is equal to 2. Okay, so that's basically what we did, because we showed that 6 times 1/3 is equal to how many times we had to move up. How many groups do we have? We have 1, 2 groups. We had 2 groups of 3 3/3. we moved up those 2 times, 3 times, right over here, look. One of these, which represents that, and then one of these. So 2 of those 3 times 1/3 is equal to, because 2 times 1 is 2. Next one is 10 times a half. So 10 times a half is 10 halves, okay? But we have to show this on a number line. So I'm going to create my number line, and I'm going to make this into halves. And so we're going to start our number line at 0, then we have a 1, then we have a 2, then we have a 3, then we have a 4, and we have a 5. I can go all the way up to 6, say. All right, maybe we don't go to 6, but we could have it on the number line. Doesn't hurt. And then now we're going to put in those halves. All right, here's a half, here's a half, here's a half, here and here and here. All right, now we've got to show how many we're moving up. We're moving up 10 halves. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is 10 halves. So 5 is equal to 10 halves. Well, how many times did we do that? Well, let's check this out. We moved up 1 whole right here. So that shows 2 times a half, because we moved up 1, 2. So 2 times a half. And then we did it again. We went up another 2 times a half. Then we went up another 2 times a half. Each time we're going up, we're making another hole. Then up over here, 2 times a half. So now we have 4 of these 2 times a halves. Then our last one, because we ended up at 5, was 2 times a half. So now, if you could see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups of these 2 times a halves. So let's make our number sentence. 10 times a half is equal to 5 groups of. Anytime in math you hear groups of, you know you're going to be multiplying. And how many times we did that? We did 2 halves. Okay? Is equal, now 5 times 2 halves, which 2 halves is a whole, is 5. And that is where we ended up. All right, so multiply. We're going to write the product as a mixed number and draw a number line to support the answer. So we have 7 copies of 1/3. Now remember, there's that word of. So in mathematics, we always say the word of is meaning multiplication. So we have 7 copies of 1/3. Okay, which means 7/3. So let's create our number line. And again, we're starting with 0, and we can have a 1 whole, can have another whole, we can end up at 3. Doesn't mean it's going to equal 3, but I can put it on there. Again, it doesn't hurt. And because I am showing thirds, I want to break this number line into thirds. So let's put it in. 1, 2, and the next one would be 3, that because it's 3/3 would be a whole. 1, 2, that 2 again would be 3/3, and our last one. So now let's see how we could do this. Let's start out with 0 and end up on 7/3 and see where we ended up. 1/3, 2/3, 3/3, 4/3, 5/3, 6/3, 7/3. Ah, look at that. We ended up right here after the whole of 2. We look like we ended up at 2 and 1/3. So that's kind of cool. So let's try to actually show this on the number line. So we moved up from 0 all the way to that first whole. What we did is we did 3 times 1/3, because that would give us a whole, right? That gave us a whole, because 3 times 1/3 is 3/3, which would give us this whole right here. And then we moved up again here, which should show us another 3 times a third, because 3 times 1/3 is 3/3, and that's a whole. And then we just moved up another, not another complete whole, we just moved up 1/3. So that's showing 2 and 1/3. So how would that look like as a number sentence if we wrote it all out? Well, 7 times 1/3 is equal to, how many times did we do it? We did 2 groups of it. 2 groups of it. So 2 groups of 1/3, we moved it up, 2 groups of it. Excuse me, 3/3, we made 2 3/3. Now we have to add on this little 1/3 here. We have to add that on. All right, so we did 2 groups of 3/3 plus that one little third left over, which is equal to 2 plus a third, okay, because 2 times 3/3 is just saying 2. That's all it is, because this equals 1. So 2 times a third equals 2. We have to add on our little fraction that we went over that whole with. And now we are equal to 2 1/3. And that's where this was, 2 1/3. All right, let's continue that. 7 copies of 1/4 now. Okay, so what does that look like as a multiplication problem? And this is, remember, the word of means multiplication. So 7 copies of 1/4 is equal to 7/4. And now I'm going to create that number line, because we have to represent it on a number line. And we're going to start that with a 0. And I'm going to show the next one is a 1, another whole, and then put another whole, and I just like to put another whole. Okay, now we're going to break this up into fourths. This number line has to be cut up into fourths, because that is what we're dealing with right here. This denominator says fourths. So let's cut it up. We got 1, 2, 3. The next whole would be the fourth. 1, 2, 3. That 2 would be the fourth. 1, 2, 3, and that third would be the fourth. All right. So now let's show 7/4. Starting at 0. Don't count 0. 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, whole, 5/4, 6/4, 7/4. So 7/4 is right before the 2. It's not actually on the 2, so it's before the next whole. So this represents this one, 7/4 is right there on the number line. And, oops, that's not 7/4. I apologize. This over here is 7/4. Because the next one would be 8/4, which would be equivalent to 2. So this is where we're on the number line, right there. So what did we do? Well, we moved from 0 to 1. We made that a whole. And how did we do that? Well, 4 groups of 1/4, which would be 4/4, which is a whole, because this is representing 4/4. And then what we did over here is that we didn't make it to the next whole, because that would have been 8/4. We just made it right here, which would be 7/4. So this little section here would be 3/4. Okay, so basically what we showed was one whole. This is representing a whole right here. 1 and 3/4. Once we combined both of these sections, it would become 7/4 would be 1 and 3/4. All right, our last one is 9 times 1/5. So basically this is 9 groups of 1/5. There's that multiplication. So what we're going to do is go 9 times 1/5 is really just saying 9/5, right? So let's start making this number line. Okay, and we're going to start with that 0. And we're going to put another hole here. And I want another hole here. Okay. And then now we actually have to divide up this number line, and we're going to divide it up into fifths. So let's start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that hole would represent the fifth, because 5 fifths is a hole. 1, 2, 3, 4, and that 2 represents another 5 fifths. So what we're going to do is we're going to count up from that 0 up to 9 fifths. Don't count the 0, count the next one. 1 fifth, 2 fifths, 3 fifths, 4 fifths, 5 fifths, a whole, 6 fifths, 7 fifths, 8 fifths, 9 fifths. Ah, look at that. Here it's right before the next hole. So that next hole would represent 10 fifths. 10 fifths equivalent to 2. So this is where 9 fifths would be on this number line, right there. So looking at this right here, we would say this group right here would represent the whole, and this section from here over to here would be 1 fifth, 2 fifths, 3 fifths, and this is not quite a whole yet, but that would represent 4 fifths. So our answer to this would be 1 4 fifths. So how would this look like if we actually went off with, if we stopped over here, this would represent 5 fifths, right? Because a whole is, that would be 5 fifths is a whole. And then we continued up another 4 fifths to get us to 9 fifths. So this would look like 9 fifths is equal to 5 fifths. There's that whole. We went up another 4 fifths to get to 9 fifths, which is equivalent to 1 4 fifths. That's right. You saw it. Practice like a champion. I know you are all ones. Come on, let's go. Show 'em what you are made of. You amazing champions out there. Well, thank you, my Fortnite friend. I hope he made you feel like you can become a champion and survive this math. Multiply, and then draw a number line to support your answer for 8 times 1/4. And I want to see your work tomorrow, or my Fortnite friend will eliminate you from the game. You don't want to lose any health points, guys. Multiply, and then write the product as a mixed number, and draw a number line to support your answer. 11 groups of 1/5. And bring in your work tomorrow. Multiply, and write the product as a mixed number and draw a number line to support your answer. Bring in your work tomorrow. Ever tried? Ever failed? No matter. Try again. Fail again. Fail better. Remember, mistakes equal learning, and it's okay to fail because we learn from our failures. Keep practicing. Have a wonderful night.